It's time now for the Sports Objective Podcast. No talking heads, just guys who love sports. Here's Dave Richmond.
Welcome into the Sports Objective Podcast. I'm Dave Richmond with vacationing Kyle from LaGrange Barber, and we'll talk to him at some point, hopefully this weekend. We're recording this on Friday afternoon, and I'm in the Greenville traffic right now, making stuff happen, as Bubba and I always do, family-wise. And I know, Bubba, you're working hard this weekend as well, right?
Yeah, I actually have a baseball game tonight for the Lake Norman Copperheads, the Southern Collegiate Baseball League team. It's local league here in the greater Charlotte area, kind of like the CPL, but not nearly as big, about 8 teams, and the majority of them are in the greater Charlotte area. And the one in upstate South Carolina, they play at Winthrop's Ballpark.
All right, we'll have to come heckle you sometime. You should have never told us that.
That'll be the first time ever, probably, for a PA announcer to be heckled.
Yeah, exactly. Want to wish my beautiful wife, Kirsten, tomorrow being Saturday, June 22nd at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon is officially our 6th anniversary, if I can make it till tomorrow, being Saturday. Almost there at 6 years. So I just want to wish my beautiful wife, Kirsten, a happy anniversary, and I love you very much, babe, and certainly from all 3 kids, Tyler, Alexander, and Mackenzie, we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much for all that you do for the family, and definitely look for many more years to come. And Bubba, I want to do that. And also, before I forget, one of our favorite coaches, it was her birthday yesterday, that being Thursday, before we get into all the actions while we're doing celebratory stuff. Happy belated birthday to Lady Pirates basketball coach for East Carolina, Kim McNeil. She celebrated her birthday. I'm sure she's 25, so we'll go with 25. Happy birthday, Coach McNeil.
Yeah, happy birthday to Coach. And next week, Coach McNeil will be on the show, and she'll fill us in on the 5 new pieces that she's adding to the roster.
Sounds like she's got some early birthday presents, by the way, Bubba. The team she signed before, the signees before this particular class before her birthday, so sounds good there. So, again, happy birthday, Coach McNeil. You've got huge fans, all 3 of us on this podcast. I'll speak for Kyle because he's already told me a few times off the air and on the air that he really likes her, and definitely huge pickup for the Pirates. So, again, nice job by John Gilbert, the Director of Athletics, Ryan Robinson, everybody a part of the search. They did an excellent job, and I'm actually going to buy season tickets I've never done that before, for women's basketball. That's how much I love Kim McNeil. So I want to support her as I do the men's basketball with Joe Dooley, football with head coach Mike Houston, and, of course, how can we not? We're not going to forget head baseball coach Cliff Godwin.
Yeah, and we have a lot of excellent head coaches, and really looking forward to seeing the product that Coach McNeil puts on the court this winter.
No doubt about it. Bubba, do you want to start with football recruiting news? The class, you got a little bit of a breakdown on them?
Yeah, let's start with the recruiting class. Our most recent commitment was Tegan Wilk. He's the defensive back out of Pennsylvania. So Tegan's a guy that the Pirates have been on for quite some time now. He made an unofficial visit as well as an official visit. Those 2 visits, by everything that you heard, went very well. So it's not a surprise that he's committing. But he's from Berwick, Pennsylvania, and he's a guy that I think Stephen Igo from HoistTheColors.net, he put it very well when he says he will remind Pirate fans an awful lot of Damon Magazoo. He's 5'11", so a little bit taller than Mags, from what I recall, but he's right around Damon Magazoo's size, and just the instincts that you see on film. Just has a nose for the football. He'll hit you, but then he does an excellent job of breaking on the football and high-pointing the football on interceptions. And just I think the Pirates are getting a good one for sure in Tegan Wilk. He came down between the Pirates and Big 12 foe Iowa State. So good pickup for Mike Houston and staff. In addition to Iowa State, he also had offers from all 3 academies, and then a host of others. More than 25 scholarships for Tegan Wilk. So in addition to Tegan Wilk, so the Pirates had also picked up a commitment yesterday, a linebacker out of the state of South Carolina, and that was Sean. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the last name. I want to say it's something simple. I'm trying to remember if it's Brown or.
And we'll find out.
I'm pretty sure it was Brown. But anyway, now the Pirates are at 10 commitments, and 3 from North Carolina, 2 from Virginia, and then 1 each from Florida, South Carolina, Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So 10 commitments, 7 states accounted for. So Coach Houston and his staff said that they were going to branch or spread out up and down the East Coast, and they have certainly done that thus far. And according to Stephen Igo, it appears as though we will be able to sign a full 25 in this class.
I thought that was the case. Bubba, I was going to tell you that one of the things that's really cool about this staff is it just feels like, I don't know about you, but not because we're doing this podcast for East Carolina fans, alums, but it just feels like that things are not only heading in the right direction, but if you ever could coach at East Carolina and you could ever recruit, they're doing exactly the way that I would want to do. I'm not saying that I can recruit, so understand that. Everybody thought, oh, he thinks he can recruit, huh? No, I'm not saying that. But if I could do it, if I were in their profession, this is exactly the way that I would want to do it, with having the Eastern North Carolina presence and then having a number of guys from North Carolina, the best you can get, and then spread it up and down with them. Not putting all your – I'm not saying not to recruit Florida, to put too many emphasis on Florida, and then we miss out on a lot of great guys. Bubba, you think about Mark Lebiano, Scott Harley. There's a lot of guys we've had in the past that are daggone good football players from the Rust Belt states, from Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, all those states, West Virginia. There's all kinds of great high schools, coaches, and they definitely deserve to get a look at.
Yeah, no doubt about it, and it was Sean Brown. I was correct, but I just wanted to confirm that on that last name, because very unlike me to forget something like that. But blanked on that last name. But anyway, in addition, like you're saying, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree as far as recruiting strategy and approach, and you mentioned a lot of the ones that come to mind, and you had Scott Harley from Neptune, New Jersey, also quarterback Dan Gonzalez was from Neptune, New Jersey, and I believe those two were high school teammates, if I'm not mistaken. And then you mentioned Mark Libiano from Pennsylvania. You also had Jamie Gray, a very good offensive lineman. I believe he played guard back in the day in the Steve Logan era in the mid-'90s. So yeah, we've certainly gotten our share of players from Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So it's good to see us going back to those states. And Dave, something else to note about this class as you look at things positionally, there really hasn't been any offensive skill talent thus far. It's really the offensive line and then also defensive talent, particularly in that front seven. And then there have been at least a couple, maybe 3 defensive backs. But yeah, the offensive line and then the defensive talent, that's been the focal point thus far, at least in terms of what has committed.
I wanted to make a point, too, that I failed to mention to you before. I just saw on ECU Football ECU Football Facebook page. Is it true about Travion Freshwater? He didn't make the grades to get in. That's what one of our former guests, Steve Parker's putting up, and I haven't heard anything about that.
Per Stephen Igo, it does seem that way right now, that Travion Freshwater out of Northeastern High School could very well not make it to campus and probably end up at a prep school and then hopefully come back head to ECU down the road.
Well, that's unfortunate. Let me just say this. I know Steve Parker was putting that, but folks, I'm preaching to the choir. Most people listen to this, but if you know any athletes, please tell them they got it. My son, I told him, Alexander, I said, listen, everybody knows, and people listen to this podcast know how much I love sports. But I told him, I said, as much as I love sports, if you do bad in school meaning behavior or the academic piece of things, then you won't be playing sports, period. And I said, please don't make me have to make that decision, and so it's just really concerning when you know that somebody, the talent of Travion Freshwater, do you have to get straight A's? No, but, and I'm not for people that know me personally, I'm not one to talk about academics in my college or high school years, but I've certainly matured in that regard more recently. But you guys, I think and maybe it's always been this way, Bubba, not with you, but there's athletes who think that they can get away with things. And I'm not saying about Travion, so let me make that very clear. I don't know the guy, but I know in the past there are people that have been, they've been promoted because they were an athlete. They were promoted. They were given breaks that most people won't give. There's some, you hear unfortunate things of like grade changing. And again, let me make that very clear. I'm not talking about him personally. I'm just saying there's unfortunate things that happen because people are athletes. What you got to do is do well in the classroom to match what you're doing on the field or on the court. And it's unfortunate if that's the case because that was a 4-star recruit, no doubt about it. And that he was one of my, as you know, Bubba, one of my favorite positions on the field is linebacker. And he's, to me, a guy that could have an immediate impact, probably the most since, I would say, Pernell Griffin. What do you think?
Yeah, he was certainly right there. And as you obviously, Pernell Griffin was a tremendous linebacker back in the Steve Logan era, I guess from
right.
98 to 2001. And I remember that recruitment process very well, and it came down to the Pirates and the likes of Penn State and a lot of other brand name programs for Pernell Griffin as it did Travion Freshwater.
Yeah, so Travion, we wish you the best, man, and hope you can turn it around. And I'm sure he listens to the podcast. No, seriously, I do hope that he does well because I agree with you, Bubba. I think there's not a question in my mind that he will be a Pirate. The question is not if, it's when. And so I guess it's one of those things where instead of coming in August, we'll see him in a couple of years, or maybe. How does that work? He really could come in next year, right? If he gets his grades up, I think.
Yeah, he
could.
He could. No, it could be the following year. So. Okay.
All right. So he's basically academic ineligible for this year, kind of like what we did with Trayvon Brown. So instead of already being here, you're not here. So you got to get your act together. Not at East Carolina, but that with his talent, if he can turn the corner. And I didn't mean to talk about it this long, but I'm just hurt that – and I tell you why I'm hurt. It's not about David. It's not about East Carolina. I'm hurt for the kid. I think he's a great kid, and, I know how things can happen, as you and I talked about academically with me last week. Things can happen, and you don't know why they happen. And so now that it's happened, you got to fix it. So that's what we got to do.
Yeah, we certainly hope that Travion takes care of his business and then chooses to be a Pirate down the road. But very quickly along the lines of the topic of academics, Tegan Wilk that we've already talked about, and then also Sean Brown, and then some of these other recruits that we've gotten recently. I've noticed quite a few of our commitments have at least one, if not multiple, academies offering them, and that's very encouraging because if an academy is offering them, I can speak from experience because I was fortunate enough coming out of high school way back in 2000 to receive appointments at each of the 3 academies, and I know my SAT was right around 1100, a little over 1100. So these guys aren't right there just barely qualifying if they're getting offers from the academy. They probably got an SAT that's at least probably around 1050 or 1100.
I got 1100 by taking the SAT twice. So no, I've never been good at taking
550 tests. And 550.
Yeah, that's not true. If people believe that's one thing that people. It's funny about me that I get in my personal life all the time. So many people believe there, and then some people that know me very well, they're like, listen. They say, listen. Don't believe half the things that come out of his mouth, and that's true. But Yeah, the SATs were not very kind to me. I didn't do very well. I don't know how I would do now, probably worse, but I have my feelings about, I don't agree with taking a test to get into college. There are plenty of people I saw that had really good grades and they flunked out the first semester of college because they really didn't want to go. It was their parents who wanted them to go, and they had really good SAT scores. So it's not always about, a point is they always say the reason why they want kids to take the SAT or now the ACT, which is awesome, is the fact that they want to, they think that's, I think it's archaic, out of date, antiquated. That's going to judge how you would do in college. Well, if that's the case, then I know people personally who went to my high school who everybody thought they were going to do well, and they didn't make it, and they didn't even make it. Not only did they not make it, they made it maybe one semester, maybe 1 year. So things like that happen. And anyway, I'm not an SAT or ACT fan. I think you're just giving people money to give money, and I would certainly go by grade point average, and I would certainly go by other things like volunteering, different things that they've done in the community. I would have a criteria for it, but I don't agree with that at all. I think you're making, for as far as SAT, you make people in Princeton, New Jersey very rich. So I'll leave it at that.
I do think too much emphasis placed on standardized testing, like you're saying, and as you take a look at it, and that's one of the things I do like, the sliding scale. So if somebody doesn't test well, so if they have a higher GPA, then their SAT score can be a little bit lower, or vice versa. So if somebody had maybe messed around a little bit early on in their high school career, and they've passed the classes they need to, but maybe their GPA is not as high as it would have been had they taken things more seriously and applied themselves, then their SAT score can make up for it.
No doubt. So I don't want to be on the SAT objective or the ACT objective. Just I think that there's plenty of people that probably feel the way we do, and so we'll move on to the next topic. What did you want to go? Where do you want to go now? We got so much to talk about, and we also have two great guests.
Why don't we talk about ballpark safety? Because I know you said that you had heard something interesting in the last few days. So why don't you tell listeners about that, and then I'll talk about an experience that comes to mind that Pirate Nation will probably recall.
You have a story, and I have a personal story, non-Pirate related, that actually happened. It could have been me. So basically, it's something that I've been wanting for a long time. I love baseball. Maybe we could look at the same thing with Clark LeClaire. It wouldn't cost a lot of money, in my opinion, and like you said, it's technology. But basically, I read yesterday, I think it was Twitter or Facebook, that somewhere on social media, that the Nationals, here coming up with the All-Star break coming up next week or so, they're going to actually take the time, when obviously not hosting the All-Star game like they did last year, in left field and right field, they're going to put netting all the way. Something that's been, I don't understand why there's people that say, I've heard this, Bubba, and I totally don't agree with it, and you'll get to and I'll let you get to your story, and then ping pong back to me, and I'll give mine. I do not believe that netting being put up hurts the atmosphere and your experience of the game. I do not believe that wholeheartedly. If you're really, in my opinion, into the game, it's not like there's a wall there where you can't see the game. So I've heard some crazy stuff, people defending the way that it is currently right now, and I totally don't agree with it. I'll let you tell your story now.
Yeah, that's one of those things. I'm sure they're probably talking about the perspective, maybe a little the player interaction from the standpoint of a toss-up on a ball hit in foul ground or something like that. But obviously, fan safety is much more important than anything like that, and they can get the ball during batting practice or tossed over the net, depending on the height of the net or whatever. But the fan safety is the primary objective for sure. The story I was going to share was way back in 2012 at the Chapel Hill Regional. So the Pirates had played an elimination game, had defeated Cornell. And so a Pirate fan, Kay Stallings, that lived in that general area, maybe maybe actually from Greensboro, somewhere in there. But Kay had stuck around to watch the Tar Heels play St. John's, and unfortunately was struck by one of those rockets off the aluminum bats into the stands. And after that, he spent several weeks in the UNC hospital. I know, of course, Billy Godwin, head coach of the Pirates at the time, as well as North Carolina head coach Mike Fox. And then I think maybe even I heard Roy Williams, in a classy move, paid a visit to Pirate fan Kay Stallings. And he did, I believe he lost his vision and lost his right eye in the process. But then it seemed like he was going to bounce back, and he was all excited about the Pirates football season in 2012. But then right there in the first couple weeks of September, he had a brain aneurysm and ended up passing away about 3.5 months after the incident. So just a horrible tragedy, to say the least. And I know I was reading an article about that some time ago, and there was a guy, a librarian down at Winthrop University, a guy by the name of Robert Gorman, I believe it was. He had written a book called Death at the Ballpark, just talking about when this had occurred throughout the history of baseball, going way back to 1862, and
wow.
over the course of that, at that time, 150 years, from 1862 to 2012, there had been 114 deaths at baseball games, and that had been either due to a thrown ball or a batted ball into the stands.
Yeah, well, just like the little girl that was hurt. I don't know her condition. Was it Houston and the Cubs? I was trying to remember the actual player and everything, but he started. I think it was the Astros, but he started bawling like a baby. And I don't know how the outcome. I guess she's okay. I don't know what happened to her. The little girl that got beamed by the ball, but it was, in other words, it wasn't his fault. But I'm sure how bad he felt when it hit her in the head. And I haven't. That was probably a month or so ago. I haven't heard it. People probably know and are like saying the answer right now, but I never knew what happened after that point. And I'll tell you a quick story. This could have been me, so that's why I'm bringing it up. At a Kinston Indians game, summer of '98, and I go to the bathroom in the middle of the sixth, and I come back. My buddy had scooted over just a little bit to the right, and it was me and him and another close friend of mine who listens to the podcast. And anyway, he moves over. We look at the scoreboard, if you know, there at center field, there at Granger Stadium. As we turn back, there's a line drive off the bat, and we were on the left field side, and all of us in the bleachers there, and all of a sudden, man, I mean, that ball had to be coming off that bat well over 90, because there was no way. The sad thing to this day, it hurts me to know that my buddy, I didn't even have it was like, talk about vulnerability. I had no way. I'm not the fastest dude, but I didn't even have a chance to even flinch and even try to put my hand out there or something to block that, nor did he. The pitch, it hits his nose. It obviously breaks his nose. Blood goes everywhere. He's in shock. And I was like, wow, that could have been me. It was a very long night. I don't know how much sleep I got. We took him to the emergency department there at Lenore Memorial, and the Kinston Indians at the time were, even though it says on the ticket, like almost kind of like generically speaking, enter at your own risk, they paid for all his bills, his medical bills and everything. He actually was very fortunate, considering I know the stories, and you told me about the one you just told about. He's okay, but that was very scary. And I had already felt the way that I was just talking about, the netting, but after experiencing that, folks, I'm telling you, I don't care how much you love baseball. I don't care how much you're a traditionalist, whatever the argument is. I don't want anybody to have to go through that. My heart just sunk. I mean, it was just a really bad night. And obviously, I still go to baseball games, but I can tell you that my seats are out in the third base side at East Carolina, and it does make me nervous, and especially now when I have not the oldest, but the middle child, Alexander the 6th and Mackenzie the 5. They don't know what it's like, for that to happen. I hope they never have that happen to them. But I was glad the Nationals brought that. They're the first, and you know how it goes, Bubba. It just takes one or two teams to do it, and then it'll be all 32.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, let me say I'm just glad. I hate that happened, but I'm glad that it did not end tragically like it did for Case Starnes and his family. But then, as far as like you're saying, you referenced Clark LeClaire Stadium. I remember initially that netting did not extend all the way down the first and third base lines the way it does now. So
that's true.
If you had one of those purple seats that was over top the dugout, you were exposed and living very dangerously. You better have good reaction time because that's
even faster.
Yeah, you had very little. You essentially had the same amount of reaction time as the players do in the dugouts, which is very little. So if you're on the top of that third base dugout and you have a left-hander up, I would not feel very comfortable. But anyway, Dave, before we have a little more roundtable, do you want to go ahead and go to one of our guests? Now let's catch up with the play-by-play voice of the App State Mountaineers. Of course, they had a big coaching change in the offseason with Scott Satterfield moving on to Louisville, and NC State offensive coordinator Eliah Drinkwitz has taken over up in Boone. And now let's talk about App State football with the play-by-play voice, Adam Witten.
Well, it's not football season, but we can talk football any day of the week, certainly. And Bubba got another great guest on the line.
Yeah, we do. Dave, as you take a look at the state of North Carolina, there were 4 coaching changes during the offseason, and one of those occurred up in Boone. App State has been the most successful program in this state over the last several years, far and away the most consistent. And now to talk about the Apps, we're very excited to have play-by-play voice Adam Witten. Adam, welcome into the show.
Guys, I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. We wanted to have you on because, again, like Bubba said, what a successful run. And, when you're calling the games, I felt bad for Jeff Charles at East Carolina and other places. But, Jeff, you could tell in his voice, he's such a loyal person to East Carolina, and it's tough when your team is losing. In your case, man, you're in high country and high cotton, right?
Yeah, one of the things I admire about Jeff is it does not matter the score, the stakes, the opponent, even the sport. Jeff always brings the same energy for everything, and I can truly admire that. It doesn't matter if the Pirates are up by 40 or they're down by 40. He brings the energy, and he does not disappoint the fans that are listening. So I can appreciate that about him. Now this will be year 4 for me coming up, and I've been spoiled because I came in just after the transition to the Sun Belt was complete. So they had the 3-9 season in 2013. And then they went 7-5 in 2014. And then in 15, they won 11 games, won their first bowl game. And then it was about time for me to jump in there and say, okay, they're at their peak right now. It's time for me to jump in here and start getting in on some of these wins. So we've won 3 conference championships and 3 bowl games in the 3 years that I've been doing this. And so, yeah, I think I jumped in at just the right time.
Yeah, it's, when opportunity knocks, you're right there. And
that's right.
What a great choice, certainly. A lot of times people worry about a coaching change. The guys here on this podcast, and I know a lot of other people I've talked to, they're very excited about the hire you guys made. Can you? How are people taking things in Boone right now about the new choice with Drinkwitz?
I think the people that have met Coach Drink are really excited about what they're going to see and where he can take App State football. He's done the tour around the state and meeting a lot of the alumni and boosters and fans and I think once they've had a chance, because he's still a little bit of unknown to a large part of the fan base. He was there for the bowl game, but he obviously wasn't coaching the bowl game in December. And they've gone through spring practice, and they did a public spring practice scrimmage at the end of the sessions. But there's still a lot of people that haven't had a chance to watch the team perform yet, and none of us have had the chance to see him actually play a real game under his leadership. So he's still a little bit of an unknown to a lot of the fan base, but the ones that have met him and spent some time with him, and I was there on all the tour stops that we did during the spring, he took this job not to maintain what App State had been doing, not to keep it at the same level, but he says, I want to do things that have never been done here before. And I think that I took this job because I saw that there was potential to take this program even further than what it is. So that's really exciting. He's an energetic guy. He's extremely charismatic. He gets along with the players and the coaches really, really well. He is an unbelievable recruiter. In his first recruiting class, when he was, he went from 0 to 60 in a second and a half because he had just gotten hired, and a couple days later was the early signing date. In this first class that he put together, he's already landed the best recruit, the highest rated recruit that App State's ever had in its school's history. So he checks all the boxes for the coach that you want to take over a winning program and to take it to another level. And now all we need to see is what happens on the field. And so that'll be the moment, I think, that all the fans that haven't had a chance to meet him and see him yet will realize that he's a great fit for what we're trying to do.
Taking a look at what Coach Drinkwitz has done in his background, he's a guy, he's got Gus Malzahn and Brian Harsin roots from his time at Auburn, Arkansas State, Boise State. So he's a guy that has a tremendous background on the offensive side of the football especially. And most recently, of course, was offensive coordinator for, I guess it was 3 seasons at NC State. But taking a look at this staff he's assembled, I think he has a tremendous blend of not only he has 4 guys who had been on Scott Satterfield's staff, if I'm not mistaken, then he also has some tremendously proven veteran coaches, a guy like Ted Roof, who had been a head coach and a very proven defensive coordinator. And then you also have position coaches like Pat Washington and Charlie Harbison. So talk a little bit about this staff that Coach Drink was able to assemble.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, in that it's a good blend of guys from the previous staff and guys that he's kind of assembled from all different areas of the country and all different levels of experience. You've got veteran coaches, you've got young coaches from all different programs and corners of the country. It's a really good mix of men. And, the thing I think beyond just the guys from the previous staff is you also have guys that are still alums of the program. Sean Clark on the offensive line, who's a big part of the offensive strategy. DJ Smith at outside linebackers. Those are 2 guys that are not just from the previous staff, but they're also alums of the program. App is a unique culture and a unique place for football, and it's a unique place that the way the program is run, the athletics department, and so having people that understand the culture just going all the way back to their playing days is really going to help to move all these new faces into kind of getting familiar with the best way to kind of transition into this. Certainly they're going to bring their own approach and what works for them, but I think also having that perspective of those backgrounds at App State is going to be super helpful. So we're really excited about the staff. Coach Drink is going to run that offense, and that's where his strengths lie in terms of his coaching abilities. And you're right, Ted Roof's been a head coach. He's been a defensive coordinator for many, many years. And he was also, when Auburn won that national championship, when Coach Drink was there, Ted Roof was a big part of that as well. So he's got championship level caliber coaches with those kind of experiences with him. So it's a great mixture of coaches. I agree with you guys.
In addition to that proven experienced blood, or new blood, I should say, coming into the program, you also have a guy like running backs coach Garrett Riley, who is, of course, a younger brother of Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma's very successful head coach. Yeah,
and Garrett's, he's one that I don't know a whole lot about just yet. I'm really looking forward to getting to know him once we get closer to the season. Saw him once at one of the spring practices, but yeah, I mean, certainly he has a family history of having great coaches, and so we always talk about like coaches' sons when they play quarterback or receiver or any other position on the field, how they have just that mind for the game because they grew up with it. I mean, it's certainly the case on the coaching staff with Garrett. And so, yeah, he's going to handle the running backs, and he's got a great arsenal of running backs to work with, and one of the best in the conference is Darrington Evans, and probably one of the best young running backs at this level of college football in Cam Peoples. So Garrett's stepping into a great situation with the running backs, considering the talent that he has at that position.
Before we dive into some more personnel things, like you mentioned, Darrington Evans, I wanted to ask you, generally speaking, kind of an overview coming out of spring ball and going into the summer. How do you think the roster is adapting to the new staff?
Well, it's a great roster, first of all, because you've got 17 starters returning, and on offense specifically, you have 10 of the 11 starters from the end of the season that are returning on offense. And so, I think if nothing else, if you're an offensive player, you got to be excited, because all you got to do is look at the history of what Coach Drinkwitz has done in his previous stops as offensive coordinator. And they go pretty quick. They put up a lot of points. It's a very exciting offense to watch and be a part of. And so if you're on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, you're really excited to start getting into this. I mean, there's a lot to learn for sure. And so, it's good that they got to get a spring practice together with the new coaching staff, and fall camp will be interesting in putting in a lot of the new systems, getting ready for the season. So there's a lot to learn, a lot of work to be done, but they've adapted really well. And like I said at the beginning with Coach Drinkwitz, he relates to the players so well. He spent a lot of time with them in just the short time he was with them in New Orleans, right at the time he got announced as officially as the new head coach. And I got to see some of those interactions one-on-one with the players, and he really can relate to them. He's a very young guy. He's got a ton of energy, very, very good chemistry with the players. And we've seen that on the practice field during spring practice. On defense, there's some familiar faces on the defensive side, but they've got 7 starters returning on that side of the ball as well. And the one thing that, this was the concern amongst some of the people saying, hey, well, we've got a new defensive coordinator coming in. Are they going to try to run a different style of defense? And that's not the case. They understand what works for App State and what works for the type of players that we have. And so, certainly the defense is not broke, so they're not going to try to fix anything along those lines. I think it's getting familiar with each other still, especially if you have a new position coach. But overall, they're not going to try to do a whole lot different on defense, because what's been happening over the last handful of years has worked so well.
Taking a look at sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No, I was just going to ask you, Adam, as far as expectations with Satterfield, man, he had the bar really, really high with I think he had a number of wins right up there with Urban Meyer over the last 4 or 5 years. There's incredible stat of the company he was with, and Dabo Sweeney, Nick Saban, I mean, big-time coaches. What are the expectations, knowing that you have a great coach coming in, but you've had the last few years, like you talked about at the beginning of the interview, what are the expectations in Boone with the fans as far as number of wins, or is it winning conference title? What do they expect out of this first-year head coach?
Yeah, I think the expectation amongst the fan base is going to be to win the conference again. I think I would be shocked if, when we get to media days in about a month, if App isn't picked to win. It's certainly a side of the division, if not the entire conference, and that's based a lot on the players, because, like I said, 17 starters returning from a team that won the league and won convincingly in its bowl game to win 11 games last season. So when you have that much talent coming back, you've got the conference's offensive player of the year and the quarterback Zach Thomas returning, maybe the league's best running back, great receivers, line, defensive players. I mean, there's so much talent coming back on that team that I think the expectations are going to be sky high. Conference championship's always going to be the first goal, winning a bowl game. But at the end of the day, like I said, whether it's this year or 2, 3, however many years down the road, the goal of this new coaching staff is to not maintain and win the conference every year and go to a bowl game and win a bowl game. That's what they want to do every year, but that's not what they're just going to try to say, hey, let's just keep this thing on the tracks and not try to do more. They want to do more. They see the potential. So, I think based on the talent, our fans have really high expectations, and there are 2 P5 road games against North Carolina and South Carolina that, could help determine whether this is a team that has a chance to run the table or not. That hasn't happened in a long time, an App State team running the table in the regular season. But I think at the start, their goal is to stay on top of the conference. That's going to be their first priority every year.
Adam, while we're on the schedule, I just wanted to ask before we move on, just taking a look at it, I really like the way things set up with a new staff coming in. And so you have a home opener against East Tennessee State, and then you have, I guess it's Charlotte comes to the High Country, and then after that, that's when you have the trip to North Carolina, and I believe that's coming off an open date, and then the trip to South Carolina is coming off a little bit of an extended week because you have the Thursday night game against Georgia Southern. So I think things set up pretty well for both of those instances.
It's a good schedule. It is. It's the first time in a few years that they've opened the season at home, and to open with 2 straight home games. They're not the names that people recognize around this state like North Carolina and South Carolina, but East Tennessee State is an historical rival. They're about an hour away from Boone West, just on the other side of the Tennessee border. And they were rivals for a long, long time in the Southern Conference before the school dropped football for a little while. And then Charlotte is kind of a blossoming rivalry that started last year with their first meeting in Charlotte. And so that's a great in-state game to have amongst 2 peer conferences. So it's a good start to the schedule. The 2 regional P5 games that are going to get people really excited. They're going to get fans really excited for these games because they're easy to get to. They're big names around the region and true measuring stick games for this program. And then, anytime you get Georgia Southern for your conference schedule at home on a Thursday night on Halloween, that's going to be a ridiculously crazy atmosphere. So, tremendous schedule, really excited for it. But I think a lot of people with those home games, a lot of people are really curious to see what happens in the non-conference portion.
And Adam, I wanted to ask you have a tremendous AD there in Boone, and I think you're talking about scheduling, and he came to mind. Obviously, great hiring that he's done while he was there. Can you talk a little bit about him and your thoughts on him and what he's done for Appalachian State?
Yeah, Doug Gillen is someone that I've known for a while now, even before he got to Appalachian. And the one thing that certainly he's leaving his legacy in doing things that are unprecedented at App State. I mean, you talk about some of the games that we've been able to schedule for football. Getting teams like Miami, Wake Forest, North Carolina, East Carolina, South Carolina as part of this deal with them. South Carolina is going to be making a trip to Boone. Getting home games like that is incredible to be able to get to that point where, we get to bring those teams up to the Rock. So from that standpoint, his legacy is already great. He's made 2 really big coaching hires this year. He had to hire Coach Drinkwitz to replace Scott Satterfield. App has only had 2 coaches prior to Coach Drinkwitz going back decades, because you had Jerry Moore and Scott Satterfield, and that was pretty much it for the longest time. And then he had to hire a new men's basketball coach in Dustin Kearns. So 2 major hires for the program: scheduling, building facilities, new end zone project, new complex just off campus where they're trying to relocate some of the sports and build a whole new complex out there. Tons of things happening. Tons of progress with construction going on campus. And they've done it while maintaining a tremendous GPA, a campus-wide GPA of a 3.0 across the athletics department. So all of that, just, that's the resume for Doug. But, what's not on the resume is just dealing with him as a person. I haven't met anybody that hasn't just loved working with him. He truly cares about his people. He does demand a lot out of folks. But at the same time, he does it while showing that in a caring way. And so, He's a great leader. I'm so privileged to be working with him. I'm glad that he's entrusted me with the ability to do the football games on radio. And like I said, I'm really glad he's at App.
And one thing Bubba can attest to, Adam, is when you mentioned South Carolina, hopefully we can get Ray Tanner on our show because there was supposed to be a game this year, and 2 years they backed out on us but in Greenville. So I'm hoping they really will come to the Rock and Boone and honor their contract. And we have another game with them. I believe it's 2021. They're supposed to come back to Greenville. So I'm hoping that I can put it out there that they will honor the contract in Boone and honor the contract in Greenville.
Well, they go to Greenville before they go to Boone, so we'll see what happens with you guys in 2021, and then we'll get an idea of what might happen down the road. But we're certainly planning on having them up there. I mean, the one thing is visiting fans. It's a great opportunity for them to kind of beat the heat a little bit during the early part of the football season, and we saw a ton of Miami fans come up when they played in Boone a few years ago. And a lot of that was because, it's mid-September in South Florida. Why not come up to the mountains in North Carolina and enjoy a weekend in 70-degree weather with no humidity? And so that's a nice thing to give the fans if they can, once they realize that, wait a minute, we're an ACC school or an SEC school. Why are we going to Boone to play App State? Well, there's a little bit more to it than just the football game. The fans actually get something out of it.
And that's what I was going to ask you. I know Bubba loves Boone like I do. Are there any hot new places that, if people are listening to this podcast right now, maybe App State fans or people that want to catch a game at the Rock, are there places to stay? What's exciting around Boone, around the town right now?
Oh, man. I love doing outdoor stuff with the family while I'm up there. We really enjoyed like the Valley Crucis area, which is nearby. We usually sometimes we'll stay in that area, which is a little bit south of Boone. Cool family-friendly stuff to do. Certainly there's plenty of places to hike on the Blue Ridge Parkway. There's tons and tons of restaurants, and now Boone's got like 4 breweries. So, it's got something for people of all different interests. And let's see, if you're going during the fall, there's all sorts, depending on what weekend it is, there's all sorts of different festivals and events going on. You can usually find some outdoor live music somewhere. And like I said, if you enjoy the outdoors, you can find 100 things to do in Boone. So, we encourage people, whether it's a football weekend or not, Boone's a great place to be, especially during the summer. I mean, it's, you're talking most days, if it's not raining and sunshine, you're talking 75 degrees, no humidity. It's so nice to be outside during that time of year when you're not just sweltering. And it's just, the humidity just smacks you in the face everywhere else in the country. So, it's, I could think of 100 different things that people could do. Whenever you guys try to get up there again, let me know. I'll point you in the direction of some good spots.
Adam, I had a couple questions regarding range projects that you mentioned. As far as the North Zone project, can you just give them a thumbnail sketch of what all that's going to entail, and that should be open for 2020, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the goal is to have the North End Zone project, which replaces the old Owens Field House. Owens Field House is completely gone. It's just a flat slab of dirt right there behind the North End Zone. So the new facility is going to be done in time for the 2020 football season. So it'll make this year a little bit interesting because it's going to be a construction zone, because they're not just doing construction on that facility. They're doing construction across that whole part of campus, because the university is actually redoing some things on that side with living arrangements, dorms, parking. There's a new garage going up nearby. Our whole stadium parking lot is gone now. So a lot is changing on that side of campus. But this thing's going to be about 87,000 square feet, and it's going to be used for a lot of different things. It's going to have club-level seating, so it's going to have, Yosef Club areas for people to be, for seating, for socializing. They're actually going to put the locker rooms, team meeting rooms, offices are all going to be in there. We'll have our ticket office in there, banquet and dining areas, and it'll be a multi-purpose medical facility as well. That will actually be, kind of outside of, not just for university use, but more for public use as well. So it's going to have like a 9,000 square foot orthopedic practice within the building. So this thing is massive. They're going to get a lot of different use out of it. And it's not just going to be for football. So there's going to be a lot of advantages that are going to be had by this facility being there. And hopefully within about, a year and 2 months from now, it'll be all ready for the start of the 2020 season.
Obviously, tremendous atmosphere there at the Rock at Kid Brewer Stadium, and one of the things that's going to make it even better, in my opinion, and a lot of the friends of mine that I've spoken with in theirs, is the removal of the track. That's been there for as long as I can remember, and that track, and then also the throwing area, the indoor and outdoor tennis facility, and then also the softball stadium. Those things are going to be relocated. The Watauga High School property, correct?
Yeah, correct. So that's what they call the App 105 project. 105 is the road that goes down, that goes through the city down where the old high school property was. And so you're right. The track and field, the tennis, they're going to have more offices and facilities out there as well. That's all going to go to that area. And so once that's all finished, and they can actually relocate everything over there permanently, then they can replace it over on campus, where the softball field is currently, where the tennis courts are, the throws area, all the track and field areas over there. They'll all move to that App 105 complex. And so, at that point, then the track would likely come out from the stadium, and they would just turf in the space that to replace it.
And then the current softball stadium, then that is going to be a 100-yard football indoor, correct?
That's the idea. Yeah. So because they're going to have indoor and outdoor courts at the new tennis facility, and so indoor outdoor courts for tennis, and then the softball field will be right next to that new stadium. Coaches' offices, player lounge, so softball would be able to do everything that they need over at that new complex. So if you're familiar with kind of the area around the stadium, the softball field is kind of up behind the west side of the stadium. Baseball used to be there, now it's softball, and it's right next to the current indoor facility. And so when softball moves to the new App 105 complex, then at that point they can have that space for more indoor use.
Adam, thanks so much. We really appreciate you being so generous with your time. We really enjoyed talking App State football and just athletics in general with you, and we look forward to having you back later on in the summer when the season's approaching and we're getting close to game week.
You got it, guys. Thanks for having me. Always happy to talk about the Mountaineers, and we appreciate you guys giving us the time.
Thank you very much, Adam. Appreciate you very much in the high country, and Adam does a fantastic job, and have a good feeling about them, Bubba. It's funny because, let me just say this too, I'll get off my soapbox. I've been on the soapbox a lot tonight. It's funny how when you say how great, like, Adam is, right, some people are that petty about, like, even complimenting a play-by-play voice. That's the business I'm in, so obviously I pay more attention to that. I love radio. Number two, let's say that, for example, when I complimented the AD at Appalachian State, I've had people on message boards who, like, thought I was an App fan. And I'm like, I'm not an App fan, and you just have to admire. That was, of course, during the last year of conference, so I guess everybody was on edge. But they've done an excellent job there, and they deserve all the accolades they get. And they made the AD made an excellent hire, and who he's brought in for football. And I think when he said, he made a good point, Adam did, about how Drinkwitz doesn't want just to maintain. Let me address that real fast, and then we'll move on. That was an excellent point. That is the reason why App State is going to continue to do well, climb up, and who knows if they go to a different conference. I don't know anything, just saying that at the level of success they've had, at some point you wonder if they will outgrow the Sun Belt. And I'm not knocking the Sun Belt, but App State has just blown me away with how well they're done. And folks, you notice what the name of the show is, a sports objective. We've got to give them props. We've got to be objective. And even though it's not our school, there's a lot of good people there. I love that school. And it doesn't mean that I am a fan of that school. I just respect them, and I think that they have lived up to the hype as far as there are a lot of people that have a season or two, or, Bubba, you think about the 3 back-to-back-to-back national championships in the early 2000s, and then you had them beating in one of those years, beating in 2007 Big Blue and the Big House at the Michigan game. There's been a lot of things they've done, and so it's funny how people, if I compliment them, if I compliment, say, we have Justin Hare, the Campbell coach. If I say, hey, he's a great coach, then it's just funny how people think, oh, he must love Campbell. And I'm like, I'm not anti-Campbell. I'm just saying that East Carolina is my number one team, obviously, and it just makes me laugh when people jump on this. You can't compliment another school besides East Carolina.
Yeah, that's what I've never understood that either. Just because you bring up something positive or recognize and acknowledge something positive regarding a school doesn't necessarily mean you're a fan of that school by any means. But as far as Appalachian's football tradition, you look at that App State football program down through the years. Jerry Moore had such tremendous success that you referenced, winning those 3 FCS titles from 2005 to 2007, and that landmark just remarkable day in the Big House, and I know people will think I'm lying, but that win did not shock me as much as it did a lot of people, because Michigan had actually struggled defensively, and I knew with Armani Edwards and a lot of the offensive talent that Appalachian had, that they could very well win that football game like they did. But in more recent times, Scott Satterfield fared so well there. Of course, former App State quarterback. He had led the Mountaineers to a tremendous season. I believe it was in 1995 where they went undefeated in the regular season before getting upset. I think it was in the second round of the playoffs. But Coach Satterfield, I think he compiled something like a 51-24 record, and 13 of those 24 losses came in his first 2 seasons. So over the last 4 seasons, I think he had 3 double-digit win seasons. 4 consecutive bowl wins. I guess technically 3, because the last one he had already moved on to Louisville, and then he had also won 3 straight Sun Belt titles with that program there in Boone. But it will be interesting for sure to see how things go under Eliah Drinkwitz, and he assembled a very nice coaching staff there for the Mountaineers. Dave, moving on with a little more roundtable, some of the things of note. I know Kurt Kraft, who we look to have on the show very soon, he and cross-country coach Josie Weaver, they welcomed in 25 new athletes, so we look forward to catching up with Coach Kraft. Something else, swimming and diving coach Matt Jabs, that program has always been so successful at ECU, and we have a new staff member as Krista Saunders, after spending 2 years with the UConn Huskies, will be joining the ECU swimming and diving staff. And then something else of note is Sean Williams. Of course, Sean Williams, the Pirates point guard in the last couple of years, he has entered the transfer portal. So we've kind of been waiting to see what was going to happen with some of the pieces left on the Pirate roster. And so Sean Williams has entered the transfer portal. And just to be clear, even though everyone who has entered it thus far, as far as last year's roster, has already moved on to a new school, him entering the transfer portal doesn't mean 100% that he is gone, although you would expect that to be the case.
Right. And basically what it comes down to, folks, is this is the question you had, does Sean Williams have the talent at East Carolina? Absolutely. But I will tell you, as someone who knows Dooley as far as covering the team, I'm not talking about were hanging out. So some people do that. That drives me crazy. But I will tell you that if Sean Williams was not on suspension for the off-the-court stuff, we had a good shot at being have a winning team, a winning season, and that would have been off to a great start. When you look at that, as in fact, Kyle, our buddy Kyle, who's on vacation this weekend, there in the Great Smoky Mountains in Gatlinburg, for all the people that are want to know where he is and find him. He made the great point about that. That could come back to haunt us, and I really feel like it did. And obviously, I think maybe they ultimately would say that there's more talent out there, that they were able to get more than what they thought. But at the same time, I just really believe with that, I hadn't heard that news, so you brought it to my attention, so I haven't thought about it. It's like right off I have thought about the situation with Williams, but I didn't know that it happened. But I just feel like that that could be a reason, and or again, if you don't, people that are, I've had people at work who are not fans of, they don't know what they're talking about of Dooley, and it's year one, even if they didn't know anything about Dooley, which they don't. But the thing I love about Dooley, and we'll move on, is the fact that Bubba, you look at how hard he had those players playing. A lot of those guys were not American talent, and we pulled off the upset at Cincinnati. I was at that game. Look at that Memphis road game, where unfortunately that's the only place we're going to play this year. We won't have James Wiseman in Greenville, which our good friend Stephen Igo pointed out on hoistthecolors.net. But that game, I mean, I felt like we got robbed. There were some close calls down the stretch there, and I think if we'd made some free throws, that would have been fantastic. That was pretty much the difference in the game. But so disappointed to hear that. But there's obviously, as Ruff used to say, Bubba, you remember when the players would get in trouble, he said he loved those boys. He loves those guys, but he loved East Carolina more. I think this is a situation where Joe Dooley is proving that he's earning his paycheck. He's going to do whatever he said to me in the media last season, that he did not come here to lose. If he didn't think he couldn't win, he wouldn't have come back to Greenville, and that's absolutely right. So kudos to the staff, and I wish the best of luck to Sean Williams. It looks like that's even though, like you said, technically it's not a done deal, he'll land somewhere, and it'll work out for him to get playing time, and it works out for us to definitely move the program in the right direction.
Oh, no doubt about it. And as far as Coach Dooley's concerned, look no further than back when Terry Holland was AD and Coach Dooley was still at Kansas, and before he took that Florida Gulf Coast job. I remember it seemed as though he was going to return then, and for whatever reason,
I know what the reason is, but
yeah, I was going to say he didn't feel as though the timing was right in terms of. I think it probably had to do with some of what you just referenced, as far as specifically more probably the finance side of things,
right?
And
that's what I was told.
The money wasn't right, and some of the commitment wasn't where it needed to be to make him feel like he could compete and win the way he would want to. But one other thing that I wanted to touch on before we get to our second guest, and that is Cliff Godwin will be going to Omaha, folks, as he is making the trip out there to see two of his former teammates who have led the Michigan Wolverines to the title series. The Wolverines took down Texas Tech 15-3 on Friday afternoon. And just hats off to Eric Bakich, Nick Schnabel, and that entire Michigan baseball program, as they became the first Big Ten team to play for the College World Series title since Ohio State did so way back in, I believe it was 1963. Is it?
Oh my!
I believe that's the date. I believe it was 63. So yeah, just remarkable what Eric Bakich and this staff and Nick Schnabel, who coaches third base and played second base for the Pirates back in the day. That duo, very proud of them, and go blue. And it's awesome that Cliff gets to go out there to support his former teammates. And I know Coach LeClaire is really happy as he's smiling down on those guys.
No doubt about it. He created tremendous men, and you'll never hear me say a negative word about Cliff Godwin. I don't know Eric Backage or Nick Schnabel outside of their ECU days, but very impressive run. And I'll tell you what, Bubba, for all the people that talk about talent plays a big role under the Montgomery era, but we always went back to coaching matters. You take a team like Michigan, who some may argue didn't even have business to be in the tournament, or in other words, they were not a national seed, and here they are. Wow, I mean, it's just mind-boggling, isn't it? I mean, they're just 2 games away from, if they can win 2 games from winning the whole thing, the biggest prize in all of college baseball. So,
yeah, it really is. And Dave, an interesting angle and something that's very intriguing about this championship series that Michigan will be playing against Vanderbilt, who is the number 2 overall seed in the tournament. And that is that Eric Backich spent 7 seasons on Tim Corbin's staff at Vanderbilt. So that's something where you have the mentee going against the mentor, and very intriguing. And man, you have Tim Corbin. He was a mentee of Jack Leggett, and back in the day at Clemson, because that was actually where the relationship between Tim Corbin and Eric Backich began, when Eric was down at Clemson as, I believe it was the volunteer assistant or a grad assistant with those guys way back, and I guess it was like 2002.
And so, also another interesting note on that would be that the very fact that Jack Leggett actually was the coach for Keith LeClaire. So yeah. So and then before he went to Clemson, so there's a lot of, isn't it interesting how Keith LeClaire? It's almost like I'm not laughing at Coach LeClaire, just that old adage about the 6 degrees from separation as far as to Kevin Bacon. It's just amazing how many, and maybe because we're hyper focused on how much we love Coach LeClaire, but it's amazing how many great men that mentored Keith LeClaire. And then in his short time, look how many great men, they were boys when they went to college, and then they became men. And look what they've done for college baseball. I will tell you this, I will be shocked in the next few years at Bryant Ward. He deserves a head coaching job somewhere. I don't know where that'll be, but I love B-Dub, and I really believe that. And the same thing goes with Nick Schnabel. I think he would do an excellent job as well. I don't want him off of the Michigan staff, but I think both those guys have a really promising future, and that makes me excited, Bubba, as a college baseball fan, too, to know that they're going to run the program well, know that you have the Pirate pride, know they played here, and just, I really believe in college baseball, and I just love when things like this happen with Michigan, where Backage and Schnabel, young coaches, they're not like Mike Martin. I just want to say this too, Bubba, before I forget. Mike Martin was a heck of a coach and still is. And I was going to say that too, for college baseball, I just want to tip my hat to him because he was in the sport for, 42 seasons, a really long time.
Yeah, he was the head coach at Florida State for 40 seasons, and then he had been an assistant there prior to getting the head job. So I think he spent at least 45 years there in Tallahassee. And speaking of Mike Martin Sr., that is, Mike Martin Jr. has taken over in his father's footsteps, and he did say what a tremendous honor that is. But there will certainly be some new philosophies or some new handprints, if you will, on the program with Mike Martin Jr. taking over for his father.
You think about Florida State football. Look at the job Bobby Bowden did all those years. I mean, he put Florida State on the map. And you look at Mike Martin, when you think about Florida State baseball, it's because of the commitment they made to the school. It's the commitment that the school made to them. But it's just a great feeling to know that a guy that Bubba this from North Carolina, he was inducted last year in the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame in Raleigh. And, I mean, that's the thing that bothers me. We talk all the time about, and I'll make this quick point and move on, but we talk about the third assistant not being hired, not getting paid or the opportunity to get paid. Guys like Mike Martin and Coach Scaff, Mark Scaff, and UNCW, when you look at guys like that are retiring, there's going to be more and more that retire, and we need to have like fresh blood in there and not have, in other words, there's a lot of guys that right now they wouldn't be able to make it off of the small salary they get running baseball camps. So it'll be interesting to see if we, hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll get that 2 or 3 years when they bring it back up. I think this upcoming time, I'm not going to hold my breath, but I think it will pass the backlash that some of these universities, like the University of Texas, the AD, and different people got. I think they got the message. Yeah, certainly hope so. You want to see that third paid assistant and come to fruition. But the last thing I'd say before we move on regarding this topic is Michigan. I mentioned them being the first Big Ten team to play for the title in all those years. This is Michigan's first trip to the College World Series, period, since 1984. And that's what it is, their 8th time overall, though. In 1953 and 1962, the Wolverines won the national championship. And then from 1978 to 1984, they made it 5 of those 7 years. So they had a nice run there in the late 70s and early 80s. They had guys, I believe Barry Larkin, Chris Sabo, a couple of Cincinnati Reds. Those guys were a couple of the big names amongst those Wolverine teams. But I will go ahead and tell you, Dave, and we can tell our listeners here in the coming weeks, we have a very big announcement. Eric Bakich, the head coach of Michigan, will be on the show. I received that word today that we were granted that interview. So very excited, and we look forward to catching up with what will hopefully be national champion Eric Bakich and the Michigan Wolverines here in the coming show. But then now we have another great guest, and let's catch up with from Husker 24/7 Sports. So there's Stephen Igo, or Sam Anderson, if you will. Brian Christopherson. Let's go to that interview with Brian to talk Nebraska football right now. Getting ready for football season, and we never get tired of talking football, especially East Carolina. And Bubba, we have a very special guest.
Yeah, we do. That's what we're going to be catching up with, a guy who he covers Nebraska football for Husker 24/7 Sports. So, and for Pirate fans, obviously they're very familiar with Stephen Igo, of course, the colors. Now we have his Nebraska counterpart, if you will, Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. Brian, welcome in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Welcome, Brian. We one of the top stories we feel like, and that's why we reached out to you, is certainly with Scott Frost and coming back to his alma mater. And there in Lincoln, we're very excited for you guys to have, I think Nebraska is one of those brand name teams. I'm not just saying that because you're on. I really feel that way. And it looks like he's got you guys headed back in the right direction.
Well, yeah, I think last year was a step forward, and that sounds funny to say when you look at their record because they finished off 4-8. They actually started the season 0-6 and did about every conceivable thing you could do wrong to lose games.
Right.
But near the end of the year, you started to see it. The offense was really starting to click. The defense was starting to get takeaways, and they went 4-2 to finish the season. And the 2 losses were at Ohio State in a game they honestly probably should have won. They lost by 5, and then on a walk-off field goal to Iowa by 3. So, you know, they were pretty close to running the table there at the end in the second half of the season after kind of an abysmal start. So the hope here in Lincoln is that they're going to trampoline off of what they did at the very end into this year. And also there's a lot of excitement because they got a sophomore quarterback in Adrian Martinez who just seems like he's kind of tailor-made to run Frost offense. I'm
very excited about it because we, of course, being East Carolina, we saw the tremendous job that Scott did down in Orlando with UCF, and now he's going back. It's a nice story. And adding on to what you were saying about the year, we at East Carolina have 3-9 seasons. We have a new head coach. We're hoping that his first year will be at least 500. That would be almost like a undefeated season for us, a miracle season to win like 6 or 7 games. But how are the fans in Lincoln? How are they taking? I have to think that they really like Scott Frost.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's a native son, and he gets the people here. I mean, he's a Midwest boy, so he knows what makes people click here and how to talk to them after wins and losses. And I think, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt for a while here. Sometimes a coach comes to a new place and he goes 4-8 the first year, and immediately in the off season you start to hear people kind of grinding on, is this guy going to be on the hot seat in another year or two? And it works that fast now in college football, as we all know. I think in Scott's case, because of his history with the program and also his resume at UCF and what they did there in his second year going undefeated, there's a belief like let this guy have some time and he'll get it done. Now that it's a different ball game, doing it in the Big Ten as opposed to doing it where he did it at UCF. I think they're finding that they got to get bigger in the trenches here, and that's been a real focus. They've kind of got knocked around, in the interior, between the hash marks, and that's what they're trying to fix. And that's such a weird thing at Nebraska because this is a program that really built itself in its great years on just dominant offensive line play and winning up front. So they got to get back to that as much as anything, because obviously his offense is a clever scheme that has worked pretty well when you get the blocking and all that handled.
Yeah, Brian, you talk about the return of Adrian Martinez, a freshman All-American quarterback, a highly regarded recruit coming in from California. So he has that trigger man just like he did at UCF with Mackenzie Milton. And then I know you guys lost, I believe, an 1,000-yard rusher and an 1,000-yard receiver, but you have some quality skill pieces coming back. So give our listeners an idea of what to expect what Adrian Martinez has at his disposal to distribute the ball and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the guy to probably know the most is J.D. Spielman. He's going to be a junior. He's a wide receiver. Had about 880 yards receiving last year in 10 or 11 games. He's pretty dynamic. He one time put up 200 receiving yards against Ohio State. So he can get it done against anybody. What they're trying to do is find the complementary pieces on the outside to work with him. Running back's kind of a question mark. They lost a guy in Divine Ozigbo who ran for 1,100 yards last season. But now they're kind of counting on this JUCO kid, Dedrick Mills. He was the top-rated JUCO running back, and he's got a good chance to be the starter. So he's a guy to definitely watch. The college football world doesn't know about him yet, but he was a guy who was actually down at Georgia Tech and ran for about 770 yards his freshman year. Had some off-the-field things that he had to clean up. Seems to have done that now and gets his second chance. So we'll see what he does with it.
It'll be fun to see as far as you were talking about the different guys, JUCO. Can you talk about I know Scott Frost was rebuilding the program there at UCF, now coming home like we mentioned. How is recruiting, I know you follow recruiting, how is recruiting going for Scott Frost and the staff?
I think pretty good so far. I mean, they had a top 25 class last year, and they felt like they were still a little behind in the recruiting cycle from when they arrived. They didn't have the relationships built up with kids that they have now. So I think you can expect that Nebraska will I think they're going to be like a top 15 type class most years, top 15, top 20 nationally. They really recruit nationally. That's one of the things that's always been interesting about Husker football. They love the in-state kids, but there's only so much talent in a state with a small population as Nebraska. So you got to go elsewhere, and this goes back to the Tom Osborne years. I mean, you got to be able to recruit California a little bit. You got to be able to pluck some guys out of Florida. Down in the southeast, Nebraska stays busy and gets a few every class. So they really span the map to get the guys they want. But the one thing they've got going for them is they know exactly what type of scheme they are on offense. There's no question about it. They're not changing all the time. And so they have a specific type of player at positions that they are after, and they kind of know what they want all the time.
Taking a look at the Big Ten West, down through the years, a lot of years it's been Wisconsin and everybody else, but then Iowa's consistently in the hunt. Last year you had Northwestern win the division, and then this year a lot of the prognosticators are projecting the Huskers to win the West. So talk a little bit about the Big Ten West and how you see it going into 2019.
Well, I think it's wide open between basically 6 teams. I think Iowa's got a shot at it. Northwestern's the defending champs actually in the West. They're replacing their quarterback, but they're doing it with like a 4-star guy that they feel pretty good about. So they're going to be in the mix. Wisconsin's kind of the interesting team because they have kind of owned the territory for most of the last 5 to 7 years. But you feel like they're maybe on a little bit of a down cycle. And they also have on paper what would seem to be the hardest schedule this year. So I think it could be tough for them. And they're trying to figure out a new quarterback too. So the door is wide open for Nebraska, even though they went just 4-8 last year to run through it. Nebraska's been averaging higher rated recruiting classes than a lot of these schools, and they've been getting it done in certain areas. But it just takes kind of ironing out those details to make that leap from being, an okay program to a great program again. And that's what everybody wants around here. I mean, I think Scott Frost is a guy who thinks college football playoff. I mean, one of the reasons he came here, he loved UCF. I mean, that's a prime place to coach. It's got a lot of things going for it. But the one thing I think he realized in year 2 there was he had a perfect season and he still couldn't get a sniff of the college football playoff. They were still like on the outside of the top 10 in the rankings, even though they're undefeated. And a guy like him, he wants to shoot for the whole thing. And so that's a big part of the appeal, I think, of coming back here for him. But it's got to start with winning the West Division. And that's something Nebraska's got to show they can go toe-to-toe in the trenches with Wisconsin and Iowa before they're going to do that.
You're talking about with the group of 5 with UCF, we are in that conference, American. It's very frustrating because we're like, even though the last few years don't represent East Carolina football, it's frustrating when you have a team like UCF who hopefully the college football people will finally realize that when they put these stories like a UCF in there, expand the playoff, and they give the fans, finally the customers, what they want, they'll find out that they'll make a lot more money. And a great guy like him, like Scott Frost, like you mentioned, we had a former coach that I got to know a little bit, and Skip Holtz, and he said to me at the time, he said, Dave, he said, he was talking, of course, the BCS era at the time, and he's like, when I have going to home and I have a kid that's being recruited by a BCS program, he said, I can't compete. He said, I'm trying way hard to do it at East Carolina, and he ended up leaving the next year. But I can totally relate to that, Bubba. With Skip, I think if we were in a Power 5 school at the time, or a BCS school at that particular time, I should say, then we would probably still have Skip Holtz here. But because of that very fact that recruiting is very tough for us, being on the outside looking in when it comes to the Power 5, it makes things very difficult.
No, that's a good point. It's good to hear it from that end, too, because that's exactly how I've always seen it. I mean, I think there's a lot of quality coaches like Skip Holtz that would have stayed where they are if they felt like they had a shot at winning the whole thing. It's sort of like you get into any profession, you want to take your big punch and see if you can do it, knock somebody out, win that championship. That's why, I'm a proponent. I know Scott Frost is too. He wants, as somebody who was at UCF and in that league, he wants this thing to go to 8 teams. You know, he wants this. Maybe you get that playoff up to 8, and you say, hey, there's one group of 5 team every year that gets plucked out and can compete and take their best shot. I mean, that to me changes the ball game, and it makes it pretty appealing to a lot of coaches in those group of 5 leagues to say, I'm staying put because, you know, I can win here, I can have success, I can get all my competitive juices going, and I still get a chance if we do this the right way to go for the whole thing and have that dream. And I wish college football would work its way to that too.
Yeah, especially when you look at a program like Boise State, where the Broncos could have been contending for that group of 5 spot in an 18 playoff pretty much on an annual basis.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and I think we're close to it. I mean, I think, you know, there's some TV deals that are still in the works. They got to work their way through. But I cannot see us not getting to 8 teams here pretty soon and having some kind of formula like that.
You know, another thing, Brian, is the fact that I've said all along, you know, with East Carolina, but you look at the expansion, if you expanded to 8 teams, it still doesn't I don't like the argument. I'll just say this. I don't like the argument that it waters down the regular season because I'll tell you what, since we've had the playoff, I've been watching way more college football than I probably should. Ask my wife and kids. But that very fact of that it makes it more entertaining that you're almost like every week you're like, oh gosh, they stumped their toe, they're not going to make it now. And I think it's created more drama for the regular season than taking away from it, my personal opinion.
Yeah, and I think if you go to 8, I still think most of the teams that would make it would have to have 2 losses or less. I don't think this is a deal where, I mean, I understand if we open it up to, you know, you win your conference championship in a Power 5, you're one of the 5 teams in the playoff. That in that case, we might have a few teams that get in occasionally with 3 or 4 losses. But for the most part, this is going to be about teams that finish 11-2 or better and have proven themselves all year and didn't stub their toe. And I think you're right. I think the drama going into that final week or 2 of the regular season would be just as intense, especially for some of those teams, you know, trying to get wild cards on the back end of that playoff. I mean, think about those teams that are ranked kind of like 6 through 12, the final week or 2 of the season and the jostling that would be going on and all the attention on, okay, who gets in here? There would be plenty of drama that would be connected to that.
One of the questions I have, I'm a scheduling nerd. Can you talk about, can you give us an idea? We know obviously the kind of idea you're going to be playing in the conference, but can you talk about non-conference, what Nebraska has this year?
Yeah, let me pull it up, make sure sometimes I have so many things running through my brain. Nebraska they start the year with South Alabama, who I think is going to be pretty down this year. That's I don't expect that to be much of a game. Then Nebraska goes to Colorado, an old Big 8 game, obviously. Nebraska got beat in Scott Frost's debut by Colorado in the last minute last year.
I remember that.
And there was also Martinez got hurt in that game and got his leg twisted, and Nebraska kind of took exception to the tackle, and so there's a little bad blood there that could be interesting. That could be a game some people might want to check out. And then week 3, they play Northern Illinois and Lincoln. Northern Illinois actually beat Nebraska in Lincoln a couple of years ago, and it was sort of the beginning and the end for Mike Riley as the head coach. So those are the 3 non-conference games.
As far as the conference schedule is concerned, we talked about how Wisconsin and Iowa, they've been the big players in the Big Ten West in recent years, and both of those clubs come to Memorial Stadium.
They do, and here's the one for if you're not a Nebraska fan, but you're just kind of curious, can they get back into the national conversation? Nebraska opens up with those games I mentioned, South Alabama, Colorado, Northern Illinois. And then they go to Illinois for their first Big Ten game against Lovie Smith's team, which is kind of a struggling program right now. There's a very real possibility, if Nebraska can take care of their business at Colorado, that they start 4-0. And if they can do that, the 5th game of the season on September 28th is in Lincoln, and it's against Ohio State. Obviously, there's a lot of intrigue with Ryan Day as the new coach at Ohio State. Can he keep going what Urban had going? And I look at Ohio State's schedule. I see a team that should also be undefeated. So if you're looking at possibilities for Nebraska to get their shot in a national spotlight game again, it could come pretty early in the year. If they can keep their nose clean, I think, you could see College Game Day in Lincoln on September 28th for Nebraska, Ohio State. They love coming to Lincoln, but haven't in a long time because Nebraska hasn't given them reason to. So I think there could be a lot of attention on Nebraska that fifth week if they do things right. So that's an interesting game to take your shot. But really the most important games, because Ohio State's on the other side of they're in the East Division. Nebraska's got to figure out how to beat Wisconsin and Iowa. And you're right, both those games are in Lincoln, and they both come late in the season. They play Wisconsin November 16th, and they play Iowa November 29th. So, you gotta stay healthy. You gotta catch some breaks in that regard, and you gotta be a team that is getting better as the year goes along. And if you do that, you got a chance to win the West Division, like people are predicting.
Well, I was going to ask, as far as expectations, we love the preseason now, or pre-preseason really. Being the summertime. Brian, you're in Lincoln. You have a pulse of, I guess it'll be Husker Nation. What is the feel right now? What's the expectation going on in the season? Obviously, you had 4-8 last year. I know you said, obviously, you want to build from that. What's the expectation? Is there obviously a bowl game? Is it more than a bowl game? What are the fans wanting there in Lincoln?
Well, they definitely want a bowl game this year. I don't think they think that should be too much to ask. As bad as last year was, they trickled about 3 or 4 games down their leg in the final minutes, and they could have been bowl eligible last year, even with all those struggles, if you just finished a couple of games. Nebraska fans are sometimes portrayed incorrectly. I see with some national writers. There's always it's put out there as though Nebraska is just expecting to go back to the mid-90s, where they won 3 national championships in 4 years, and that's the bar, and Nebraska fans will settle for no less. That's not exactly true. Yes, that would be a dream scenario, but people are reasonable here. They understand that was a special era. What they really want to see is Nebraska consistently winning their division and having a shot in the Big Ten championship game to make the season special. Put yourself in position almost annually or at least every 2 years to be that kind of team. That is the expectation. They want to be that team that is in the same conversation as Ohio State again and Michigan when you talk about the Big Ten. Nebraska was brought into this conference to bolster the league with its football reputation, and quite frankly, Nebraska has fallen way short in that since they've joined the Big Ten and has been kind of a letdown. So Nebraska's got to break through and kind of earn their respect, and I think they're close to it. They might be a year or so away, but I think most fans around here are expecting at least 7 or 8 wins, and anything beyond that would be special.
Brian, you've certainly been very generous with your time, and before we wrap this up, I did have one other comment/question for you, and you referenced that Nebraska fan base. They hold a remarkable record, and sometimes I think this gets brushed aside or under the rug, so to speak, and kind of gets and that happens because of the fact that Nebraska is the only Division I school playing football in the state of Nebraska. But then you look at the number of people in that state, and it's remarkable no matter how you look at it, that they have sold out every game at Memorial Stadium dating back to 1962. So talk a little bit about that. And then I know I saw on your website and then other places on the internet that you have some things going on with the program, like Friday night football in June with some different camps and what have you. So talk about that.
Yeah, there's certainly a special mania that surrounds it. You almost have to be here to understand it sometimes. I mean, we're talking about a state with a population of about 1.8, 1.9 million people. So it's not heavily populated compared to a lot of states. And yet they fill up in 85 to 90,000 seat stadium every week and have done it. They've filled that stadium since the Bob Devaney era in the early 1960s. So you got to go back to the JFK years to find the last time a Nebraska football game wasn't sold out. I always tell people, I'm from Nebraska, so there's a bias, but I understand it's not everybody's cup of tea. But I always say, if you're a college football or football lover, for 7 weekends per year when Nebraska has home games, there's no place I'd rather be than Lincoln, Nebraska, and I mean that honestly, because there's just you can feel it in the air on Friday afternoon. It's starting to pick up, and then Friday night there's just this buzz wherever you go in town that it's a home football weekend, and so that's special. And the camps you're talking about kind of clue you into the mania that surrounds it. Nebraska does these Friday night light camps where they have recruits come in. They did it with the previous staff, and one of the camps, they invited fans to come, and they really wanted them there, and there was like 4,000 people, 4,000 or 5,000 people just sitting in the stadium watching high school kids who may or may not even commit to Nebraska running around because they thought they could help, with their passion, bring some of those recruits in. So that's what it's like, and it makes it fun to cover them because the passion is so deep. I mean, when they lose, it hurts around here, and when they win, it's a pretty special deal. But the thing they've got to get back to, when I was a kid growing up here, when Nebraska lost a game, I kid you not, it was like the end of the world. I mean, you thought, will the sun come up, because they just didn't lose that much. And it's gotten different. They've lost a lot in the last few years, and people have kind of grown accustomed to it. And I always say when Nebraska football is truly back, it's going to be that feeling in the state where when they lose a game, it's like, what the heck happened? Sort of like it is in Alabama when they lose a game now, and people are just like, how'd that happen? That's when you'll know that Scott Frost has really done what he hoped to do when the losses start to hurt and knock people out the way they used to.
It's funny you say that. We just lost, obviously, 2 miserable losses to Louisville in the Super Regionals for baseball. And yeah. Cliff Godwin was quoted as saying it's like when you have those kind of losses, knowing that you're not going to Omaha, it's like being hit by a truck. And I thought that was, when you just said that, it triggered that memory of him talking about that. And I guess that's the same feeling that we have in football that we've got to get back to is whenever it's people, in other words, people care, and it hurts so much that I know one of our local Channel 9, WNCT, the CBS affiliate in Greenville, Brian Bailey, has been here since 1984. He says when ECU loses, it's hard to get a loan on Monday morning.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth of so many places. I mean, when it hurts, things are actually probably in a good place. You know what I mean? When it doesn't hurt, when it's just like, yeah, that happened again, right. That's when you know you're a ways away still. So I mean that's a fight so many places to make it where, and I think every coach probably has that fight with kids these days. Age 18 to 22, you got to make them. I mean, I'll be honest. I've covered some Nebraska teams in recent years where they lose, and you'd see guys walking through, and you'd be like, it doesn't look like it stings these guys that much. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's just like they're going out to do what they're going to do on a Saturday night, and that's that. You need it. You need that culture within your program, whether it's Nebraska or East Carolina, where you lose a game and you see dudes who their night's ruined that are in the post game room, and this is not going to be a good 24 hours for them. And that's when you got a pretty good culture wherever you're at.
No doubt about it, Brian. I appreciate your time. Can you? We really do, Bubba and I. Can you tell folks how they can get a hold of your content? And obviously, we're 24/7 members, being a part of Hoist the Colors. Can you tell folks about how they can follow you and with social media
sure.
and how they can get your content?
Yeah, our website is Husker247.com, Husker247.com, and I'm on Twitter and all that stuff. Husker247BC is my handle, but especially for those folks in East Carolina or fan bases around there that are on 24/7 Sports, you can usually access all that. And I'll tell you this, Nebraska football even is kind of an interesting animal to follow from the outside, because it's one of those programs where I think a lot of national people want to see them kind of get their brand back, and they've got this native guy trying to do it, but you know, it's hard. There's some challenges there, just like East Carolina has, and so you're fighting uphill a little bit, and so that it makes it a pretty interesting story.
Brian, again, thank you so much, and good luck to the Huskers. And we have a special project we're working on called Friday Morning Football, and we hope to have you back on that before the season, and maybe a time or two in the season as well.
All right, no problem, guys. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you very much, Brian. It was great to catch up with him. He was a really cool dude, and what's great about these people that we have on the show, they interviews, is there's so many people, no matter the sport, that are really passionate. He covers the Cornhuskers, and I think, as I mentioned, again, I'm not a fan of Nebraska, but I think that you'd be a fool to not recognize the fact that when college football is great, when a program like Nebraska is good, and I think that Scott Frost is going to do it. It may take, I'm of the feeling that it'll be maybe year 3, but I think, in other words, the American, and no, obviously I love the American Conference, but the Big Ten is amazing what they've been able to do in recent years, especially. They've always been good at football. I think they took it to another level with the hiring of some tremendous coaches. And to think that Scott Frost, I think that he's in a really elite conference. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like I said, there's a possibility in year 2 that it'll happen. But I think another thing that was cool that he mentioned in the interview too, Bubba, is that sometimes the media, sometimes the fans across college football get the wrong idea that Cornhusker fans are expecting national championships back like under Tom Osborne. They realize that it's a new era, and I think they have a shot to be in the college football playoff if Scott Frost can stay there, and they'll give him the commitment, which I think they will. The question is when that will happen. I don't know, and you don't know if he'll ever win one, It's hard to say, but I will say that I think that the Cornhuskers will be back in that, I would say, most likely a top 10, top 15 program down once Scott Frost has a few years under his belt.
Yeah, I really think so. I think they'll be contending and pushing for a spot in the college football playoff. I guess last year they finished up 4-8, but they really came on and played some very solid football there late in the year, and it seemed as though they may push for a 500 season. Lost a couple of tough ones down the stretch, but you really saw his impact taking hold, and I know they had a late season trip to Iowa and some tough challenges late last season. But I think this year I certainly expect them to double that win total and get to 8 wins, or if not more. I know some folks are projecting them to win the Big Ten West, and that would not shock me. And they do return their quarterback, as we discussed, in Adrian Martinez, and then a lot of skill pieces and other talent on that football team. So very appreciative of Brian coming on the show to talk Nebraska football. And that's kind of one of those, like you were saying, that even though I'm not a Nebraska fan, they have a remarkable atmosphere there at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. And you always hear that it's the 3rd largest city in the state of Nebraska on a game day behind Omaha and Lincoln. and it really is right there. I guess it's just under
85,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's just under 90. I think. It's somewhere right around 90,000, give or take. Okay. But I want to say it may be 89,000. But yeah, the 3rd largest city on game days, and they had that remarkable sellout streak that we discussed in the interview dating back to the 1960s. And I know they're the only major program in the state, but it's also not nearly as populated as North Carolina.
Right.
And so, yeah, we have 7 FBS teams compared to their 1, but they also don't have 10+ million people or whatever we have. So
right.
No matter what angle you look at that streak, it is pretty remarkable. Did you have anything else, Dave, that you wanted to talk about as it turns to a roundtable before we wrap things up?
I don't have a roundtable, but I did want to give some breaking news that I discussed with you and haven't had a chance to discuss with Scott. He's on vacation, so he probably will hear this on the podcast. But as far as our pirate cruise, we do know more of that. We know the itinerary now, Bubba, and the dates, so we want people to save those dates. It's going to be called, simply enough, the Sports Objective Pirate Cruise. It'll be July the 16th to the 19th out of Charleston, going from Charleston to the Bahamas, and it's going to be a 4-day cruise to basically you'll have one stop in Nassau. We're doing this to get used for people that have never been on a cruise, or people like Bubba who are extremely busy, and I understand that. I am as well. I can tell you that we're working out basically what is coming down to as far as price. People may want to know. Before we release that information, my good friend Dana Shrink, who is my travel agent, and that's the reason why I'm letting her do it, is she's handled my stuff for a long time now, almost a decade, and I would not trust anybody else. No offense to anybody else, but she and I have a really good working relationship. I know that she's going to take care of the people, and Bubba, that's really important to me. People work hard for their money, and I want folks to know that she's going to be upfront and honest, and think the world of her. What it comes down to as far as if people want to know prices, she's working out right now. We're going to reserve at least 20 rooms or more, so she's trying to find out the group rate that we're going to get, and she's working on that right now with Carnival. So I want to let people know that it's going to be in July is peak season, but it will be, because we chose a 4-day cruise, it'll be a great event, and you're going to get more bang for your buck. And I hate to speculate on prices, but I will tell you that it's going to be a really nice cruise. Again, July 16th to 19th, Charleston, the Bahamas. One stop on our itinerary will be the Nassau. Nassau is absolutely gorgeous if you haven't seen it. And we're going to do we're going to try to do one of the things we're trying to work out now with the officials. We believe we can work it out. Is Bubba, as I told you, a special podcast we're going to record on ship. It's going to be pre-recorded. It will not be live. The internet is one of the things that's not very good on a cruise ship, at least the one I've been on. So we're not going to even try to do a live one. We'll pre-record it. The people that are there, they're interested, they can come and be a part of the podcast as far as an audience. And we'll have special guests on there. And we have people that, even some former players, Bubba, that we've talked to off the air are interested, and I'm sure maybe more. But I just want to let people know where we stood on that. We're going to make an announcement very, very soon, probably in the next week or so, because we're trying to give people the information and give it to them in a lengthy amount of time that they can. You can even, with Dana, you can make payments all the way up to like about 2 months before we're going to give them around 10 months to pay for this cruise. So look forward to it. Hope a lot of people will it's not the Love Boat, but it'll be the Pirate Cruise from the Sports Objective, and I cannot wait. And by the way, one more thing, Bubba, on that I failed to mention. We're actually going to have, because we're pirates and Dana took that to heart, we are going to have a social one night where we're going to get to lounge. One of the clubs will have a private party for all the folks that come on the cruise that are part of the Sports Objective Pirate Cruise. You will be invited to a special party that only the people that sign up will be allowed to. So I want to give folks, that'll be another thing that we're going to throw in there for folks. It does not cost you a penny for that. If you sign up for the cruise, you'll be you'll be allowed to come in the Sports Objective, our podcast, and you'll be allowed to come in the special party that we're going to have a social. And Pirates, Bubba, we love to party and have a good time.
Yeah, Dave, we appreciate you working so hard and putting this together, and it's good to see, that a lot of these logistics with regards to the cruise are being worked out.
Yeah, I would just want to tell people, sometimes people, and we're all guilty of, in various ways in our lives, doing things hastily, but being hasty, I should say. And I want to make sure when we give out information that it's correct. And when it comes to people's money, we are doing everything we can to keep this affordable as we can. Bubba is probably the richest person. No, I'm kidding.
I'm the richest school teacher on the planet.
No,
especially one for no master's degree and no national board certification.
Is that your wife? Does Stacy have that?
She hopefully will have that. She's going to be working on her national board certification starting this fall.
Well, I admire and respect her. Anybody that knows teaching and what that means, it's not easy to get that. They take that very serious. It's not easy to get your teaching degree. So I can only imagine, but I know people that have gone through that, and anyway, tough thing. But as far as the cruise is concerned, folks, we're still working on the final detail. Probably the most important part, as I told Dana, and I want to give her a shout out. She's been working on this behind the scenes, Bubba, for a while, and knowing that we made the executive decision to make it a 4-day cruise instead of 5, that was one of the details that we worked out a few days ago. And so I just want to tell people, about that and talk a little bit about it, because I really want people to go. If you're a pirate, think about it, a pirate and a ship. Are you kidding me? It makes perfect sense. And we're going to have a really good time. The good thing about a cruise, if you've never been on one, I know, Bubba, you and Stacy went on your honeymoon, as did me and Kirsten. We went on a 5-day out of Charleston in 2013 on our honeymoon. So I want people to definitely consider it and keep those dates in mind. Save the dates for next year. Again, it's for 2020. I'm having friends and family think that I'm inviting them on a cruise next month. If it only were that cheap and it was only that simple, things don't work out that way usually on cruises per se. So anyway, enough about that. I just want to give an update on that. And I know, Bubba, we've got so many great things we can just mention coming up. The Sports Objective Watch Party. We have also another, just around the corner, we're going to have the 50 Pirates in 50 days, right?
Yeah, the 50 Pirates in 50 days feature that will begin on July the 12th and run up until August 30th, the day before game day at Carter Finley Stadium against the Wolfpack. So we'll catch up with 50 former Pirate football players or coaches and get their perspective on their time in the purple and gold, and then also talk a little present day going into the Mike Houston era. And we'll chat with Pirates from a variety of eras, including the likes of Shane Carden, David Daniels, who was the fullback, on that 1991 Peach Bowl team that went 11-1. And we'll really enjoy catching up with all those Pirates. Somebody else that we'll be talking to, some of our other guests, in addition to Eric Bakich, the head baseball coach at Michigan. We'll also talk to Peter Burns of the SEC Network. He was on the show a couple times last fall. And in addition to Peter Burns, we'll also talk to Stevie Fly. He has his own podcast or show of sorts with The Final Score. He does an excellent job of talking to some former Pirate football players and coaches, but also other guests from the sports world. So we'll catch up with Stevie, talk some Pirate football, professional wrestling, among other things.
And he's also a head football coach for 8-man team Northeast Academy in Lasker, North Carolina, that I called the game there last year. And very cool thing, Bubba, where they actually back the tailgates up to watch the football game. It's kind of like, imagine having a field in your backyard and your friends come over and they pull up the tailgate. It's just a really cool atmosphere. And Lasker is Lasker. It sounds like maybe a redneck saying Alaska. But it's
hey Dave, I think the next Sports Objective cruise we go on, I think we should take one up to Lasker. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. That sounds
all right.
Well, that's one that I will tell you, not to be a nerd on cruises, but it's on my bucket list. That's going to be very hard for people to do because we're not rich, we're not elite school. But that's very, not to say people don't have money that are pirates, but that's a very expensive cruise. And maybe we can do that sometime, but we'd have to raise money for a couple of years to pay off. It's about, a lot of times that one's about $2,000 a person in that range. I hate to comment on that because it's, everything changes and depending on what season and all that, but it's definitely not a cheap cruise. And so we'll maybe at some point we'll do that, but we'll I call it the starter cruise from Charleston to the Bahamas, and we'll start off there and see how it goes. But I think it's going to be very successful, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that sign up, and I can't not wait. I'm so excited.
Oh, no doubt about it. And in addition to the guests I've already mentioned, we'll be catching up with ECU women's basketball coach Kim McNeil. Look forward to having her back on the show. We had her within the week after she was hired, so see how she's settling in, talk about the 5 additions we have to the women's basketball program. And then also we'll catch up with the head head track and field coach, Kurt Kraft. Coach Kraft does such an excellent job, or has done such a tremendous job of carrying on what Bill Carson led for 40 years from, I guess it was 1967 to 2007, as we discussed here several shows ago when we had Udon Cheek on. Yeah,
and also, folks, we're working to get CeCe Buford on. I know Malcolm had a lot going on with baseball, so we'll try to get her on. She's the new women's golf coach for folks that don't know, and we'll have her on very soon. I appreciate Malcolm. I tell you what, let's give a shout out really quick to Tom, Mark, and Chip, and I don't want to leave out everybody there, but everybody that's there, and Pat, I just want to give them a shout out because they have been, Bubba, as you know personally, but you and I have contacted them individually. They have been really good to us, and we couldn't do this podcast. We could do the podcast, but what makes it special is when we're able to get coaches on and the like, and they've been good about helping us out with that. So we don't say that enough, so I wanted to thank them as well.
Yeah, they've been great. They always respond very quickly to our emails, and they certainly have a lot going on, so we appreciate them giving us the access that they do to East Carolina coaches and players.
No doubt. So anyway, we got a lot. I know Mark Lindsay of Rivals.com, PirateIllustrate.com. He's going to be with us in the next week or so. He agreed to come on, so we're working out that. And a lot of other great guests. As you can imagine, Bubba and I work really hard. And Kyle does the token ones. He gets the really big names. I think he just saves up his tokens and cashes them in on the really big names. But Kyle's the type of guy, he likes to make the big splash. Oh, yeah, Jim Cornette is next, apparently. So Corny will be on here, and if that happens, there's not many people I got nervous with, but Jim Cornette was one that I truly love and love his podcast, and maybe you don't like his political views, or certainly the language is very bad, so Riley and Reese and, of course, Mackenzie and Alexander could never hear that podcast, and hopefully Stacy wouldn't hear it out of language is really bad, and Kirsten the same. But anyway, before we go, Bubba, again, I want to say hello to my beautiful wife, Kirsten. I want to thank her, Stacy, and Jessica, the 3 wives of us who put up with us. And our anniversary is actually released in the podcast today. So happy anniversary, babe. I love you very much. And 6 years, many, many, many years more to come. I cannot wait. And it's been a long road as far as our relationship, 7 years. For people that know me, that's a huge accomplishment. But I'm really, and some people say I've outkicked my coverage, overachiever, and I would agree with them. I love you very much and appreciate all that you do for me and as a husband and the kids for sure. I love you and happy anniversary. So she actually is letting me do the podcast here right before anniversary, and we'll have it out on the anniversary. So people thinking I'm taking the time away from her, I'm not. It's just we're doing it now, and so that we'll spend time together tomorrow. So, Bubba, thank you so much for all that you do, and Kyle is on vacation as well. And until next time, you've been listening to the Sports Objective Podcast.
You've been listening to the Sports Objective Podcast. Join us next time as the guys will be objective, and the objective is sports.